You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. I wanted to jump in at the start of this episode to say two quick things. First, Charlie and I recorded this after not being able to record for a while, just due to scheduling conflicts. So at first, we had our whole audio setup wrong, each of us independently of each other, on both sides of the recording. I wanted to mention that in case the first few minutes sound a little off to you. Don't worry, it's not you, and we do get everything worked out in pretty short order. I find this hilarious, and I hope you do too. Second, it does look like all the free tickets for Spooky Season Kickoff on September 26th at Arcana are claimed, but we're also keeping a wait list. If you'd like to be on that wait list, no problem, just email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. If other folks need to cancel their tickets for some reason and tickets then become available, then we'll let folks on the wait list know as that happens. Also, if you're going to be there, you'll see a sign on the door of Arcana that night that it's closed for a private event, but that's us. So come on in. Thanks for listening, and on with the episode.
Hey, Michael, do you remember when we used to have a podcast?
Yeah, I do. I think of it very fondly, and I think it's the thing we're doing right now. I'm not sure.
I don't know. We haven't done it in a really long time, so I kind of like, is this it? Is this recording?
I might be about to cut this from the episode, but it is now a time to talk about what's been up.
So I have a little preamble, and we can't talk exactly about what's been up yet.
Okay.
But I am your co-host, Charlie Bushaw.
And I am your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist and single award-winning podcaster, Michael G. Williams.
And here's my preamble. Volume 2 of the Arcane Carolinas book series is available on Amazon, written by Michael. He's very bad at tooting his own horn, despite his intro that he does every time. So I am going to celebrate him and the book here and now.
That is extremely accurate.
So I will say that it's good. And of course it's awesome. The foreword is by me.
I mean, there you go. That's all anybody really needs to hear.
Wrote like the whole 3 paragraphs in there.
You did a bunch of illustrations for it too, though. Don't forget that.
There's some doodles. But yeah, Michael wrote a book for the Arcane Carolinas book series, and it's available now on Amazon. There's also a new figurine series from Arcane Carolinas, Critters and Cryptids, which is available on the web store. When was the last time you went to arcanecarolinas.com and clicked on merch? It's probably been a while.
I'm going to do that after this recording, actually.
So the first figurine in the series is Nobby the Sasquatch, because Nobby is covered in Michael's new book.
Yes!
I went really hard this year to go a little extra and wrote an Atari 2600 game and had physical cartridges made of a Nobby the Sasquatch video game.
It is so wild. And when Charlie was like showing it to me, it was so cool. You have no idea. The part of me that was once upon a time a child with an Atari 2600 absolutely vibrated with anticipation.
So those are available also on the web store. There's a bunch of stuff up there now in different categories. Those are limited, as you would imagine. It's not something we can really mass produce, but there's a couple.
You don't own an Atari 2600 cartridge factory?
No, but it was made by an actual subsidiary of the current owner of the Atari Corporation.
That's so wild.
Yeah, I learned really quickly that it's incredibly obtuse programming, and there is an error in the code. It's a playable game. Like, you can play it. But once you get a game over, if you hit reset, it just keeps your score going. So, like, you can get an infinitely high score.
Amazing. That's what, again, that child who had a 2600, I needed that.
So you actually have to power it off and power it on to, like, actually reset the game.
Yeah.
Those are all things that cost money. We really pride ourselves on Arcane Carolinas being accessible and community-based, and we are super stoked to be doing our spooky season kickoff spectacular in-person event at Arcana again.
Yes.
the third year in a row we've done it there.
Yeah, I think so.
Because the first year was virtual, and then we did there. Yeah.
What is time?
That is a question I've been asking myself a lot lately in my personal life. So, that sounded dark. Everything's fine, people. There will be a link in the show notes about that, because it is a ticketed event this year, but they're free. They're free tickets, but it is ticketed.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure we didn't, as far as I know, violate any fire codes last year, but we really want to make sure that we don't overcrowd the room. We just don't want to get Arcana in trouble. We don't want it to be a bad experience. So
yeah, it was cozy last year to the point where we were like, we should probably have counted how many people were here.
We did, and it's exactly one fewer than whatever the fire code said it could be.
Yes, that is exactly what we did. I'm going to lug some Ataris and cartridges and TVs to that event too. So if you just want to play the game that I talked about earlier, we'll have it there. We'll do our regular live episode recording. We'll have some very special giveaways. I'll go ahead and say what it is. The Nobby figurines, Critters and Cryptids. There will be a Arcana exclusive Nobby that you can only get at this event. Because I am a sucker for collectibles. It will be complimentary. So that's another reason that we need to ticket this, because we have to limit it. Come on out. Get yourself a free little figurine. That's the swag for this year. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
So September 26th is when that will be at Arcana in Durham, North Carolina. We will both be there, which is the first time we've done something live together in, is it this since Retcon, since February?
Since Retcon. Mm-hmm. The current plan is that we will be hanging out starting at 7:30, and then we will record starting at 8.
Yes. And then I will be solo at the Southern Gothic Festival hosted by the Kershaw County Library in South Carolina on October 18th. So those are our two live things that I can think of off the top of my head. I feel like I'm missing one.
We have stuff in the hopper for next year, but I don't think I think that's everything we have for this autumn.
Great. Awesome. Should we actually get to the show? I feel like this is the part of the episode where normally people are like, buy a ghost mattress or magic spoon cereal. At least ours is relevant and full of free things.
Yeah. If you could check whether you have the correct microphone selected, because you sound different.
Let's try that. How's that sound?
Oh, see, that sounds great. And it sounded fine for the beginning. We should keep it.
Okay.
And this is all just going to stay in, as this is what it's like when we haven't done this in a little while.
Yep. We are rusty.
Just in case anybody thinks that we're like too high on our own smoke or anything, we're human.
This is a very authentically real podcast of two dudes talking about stuff.
I like how neither of us had the right microphone selected.
Yeah, I haven't used this in some time. So Lake Norman.
Lake Norman. Let's talk about Lake Norman.
Lake Norman is the largest man-made body of fresh water in North Carolina, created between 1959 and 1964 as part of the construction of the Cowens Ford. Did I say that right? Cowens?
As far as I know, you did, but I don't know.
Somebody will correct me. The Cowens Ford Dam by Duke Energy. Located in Iredell County, 40 miles north of Charlotte, Lake Norman is fed by the Catawba River and drains into Mountain Island Lake to the south. We have covered all of this information in one of our very early episodes. I think it was the Dragon Con episode, like either our fourth or fifth.
Yeah, very early.
Yeah, very early. We talked about Lake Norman and the Lake Norman monster. That's not what we're doing here. That's why I'm reading this like, haha, because it just feels very disingenuous. I'm like, people that have been with us already know this.
But there are going to be people who, for their own reasons, have not listened to early episodes, but they're listening to this. So there you go. You're catching them up.
Okay. So it was named after the former Duke Power president, Norman Atwater Cock. So they went with Lake Norman instead of Lake Cock.
Do tell.
The Lake Norman is sometimes referred to as the inland sea of North Carolina, which is like really dressing it up.
That is wild. I'm just going to say that is wild to everything you just said and leave it there.
I will continue to break you throughout this episode.
Good. I am trying really hard to not put anybody in the position of having to explain anything, and I'm failing. So please proceed.
So it has 520 miles of shoreline and a surface area of more than 520 miles of shoreline and more than 50 square miles of surface.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe N1C is not so off the mark.
Yeah, I just feel we'll get to my feelings.
Okay.
We're about to start edging up to my feelings here. You can tell we haven't done this because like every little thing that would normally just make you smirk is breaking.
Yeah. Okay. Go right ahead. I'm just going to be over here.
The bottom of the lake is engineered soils.
Engineered soils.
Yeah. Various clays and other soils with plasticky qualities blended together for artificial enforcement. Because again, it's a man-made lake.
Oh, yeah. So they basically were like creating a surface that a lake could sit on top of by using specific forms of clay and earth and whatever.
Yeah. And like blending it all together. And it requires upkeep and maintenance.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. It's stable, solidifies the lake, doesn't break down, the water doesn't drain out.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really interesting. The views I am about to express are strictly that of Charlie Newshaw, not that of Michael G. Williams or the show Arcane Carolinas. However, they are based on fact.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
Duke Energy reports that the water is safe and coal ash contamination is not a problem. The power company is not a major concern to residents around the lake. This is in spite of possible efforts on the part of Duke Energy to obscure their own findings from 2018 when they issued a 20,000-page report.
Yeah, the sound that you're hearing right now is me looking very skeptical.
And in that report that they issued, there is data that confirms, and I quote, levels of radium in groundwater far exceeding EPA drinking water standards. Another quote, could clearly harm those who would use this water for drinking.
Oh, if anybody's not sure why radium is bad, just Google radium girls and you'll read a really horrifying story about some young women who worked with radium in the course of their careers early in the industrial era.
Yeah, the people painting the watches.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There are very few recent documented reports containing data about water quality in and around Lake Norman. However, despite the quotes that I just gave from that 2018 report, Duke Energy also routinely monitors the water quality of Lake Norman as a requirement of the NPDES permit from the McGuire Nuclear Station. And there have been, quote, no obvious short-term or long-term impacts of the nuclear station.
No obvious. Does monitoring involve sitting on the other side of this like 50 square mile lake with a pair of binoculars and going, yep, looks good to me?
So all of this is going to come together here. I'm about to bring it all home as to like, Charlie, why are you talking about water and dirt? This is not a water and dirt episode. There is going to be one of those this fall, but this is not the water and dirt episode.
Okay.
So they do periodically issue updates saying that the water quality is good from both lake water and groundwater.
Okay.
So they are aware of the report that they issued and its contents. And it's a big PR battle, basically, just to have people reminded that it's safe. But this is an entertainment podcast. And I can't help but mention that Lake Norman is also home to a bunch of weird stuff, from the Lake Norman monster to ghost sightings to UFOs.
The fact that there might be radioactive material in the water just like, really makes you stop and consider all these things that people say.
It's just, if you like the idea of triangulating weird stuff to specific geographical areas, Lake Norman is just like the old country buffet of weird.
Okay.
Like it's just, like it is an absolute vortex of good stories and big houses I'll never be able to afford. The legend we're talking about today is specifically a series of stories, and that is UFOs over Lake Norman.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to start with the big one, which is also from 2018, which is funny. I just made that correlation that their report on the groundwater was from 2018, and then this is from 2018. So one of the larger UFO stories is from May 29th, 2018. A man named Jason Swing from the town of Mooresville took video of a cigar-shaped object that flew over Lake Norman near the Hager's Creek boat landing.
Okay.
That video made the rounds all over the internet, was featured by news outlets until at least August of that same year. So from the end of May until August, that video was circling the internet of like, what is this thing that was seen over Lake Norman? His direct quotes on the incident were, "I'd never seen anything like that before. It was really crazy. It was a UFO. It was unidentified." He went on to describe it as, quote, "maybe the size of two 747s. It was massive. No one could tell me what it is."
That's pretty big.
He further went on to say, like, this guy was willing to talk about it. "I feel like there's another life form, but after I saw this, I know there's something now."
Okay. Interesting.
Here's the thing with Jason's story. On August 16th in USA Today, the Goodyear Tire Company said, "Oh, that was our blimp."
Whoops.
Yep. It had been covering the Coke 600 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway and flew over Lake Norman afterwards.
Oh my God. Lake Norman is exactly the right place for NASCAR and UFOs to intersect.
When pressed on, well, why didn't you say anything earlier? They, quote, "didn't want to get in the way of a good story."
Oh, okay. Sure. I wonder if that also means that maybe they were like a little outside of their published flight path and they were like, "Oh, we can't tell people that was us because somebody's going to do the math and figure out that we veered off course."
You're probably wondering at home or in your car or wherever you're listening. And Michael, I'm sure you're wondering, why are you bringing this up if it's that easily debunked, right? Like, why is this even worth talking about? And I think there's enough smaller stories about UFOs in the area, both before and after, to be meaningful. So there's this one big one that is pretty widely used to dismiss UFOs over Lake Norman. If you Google UFOs over Lake Norman, this is the big one because it hit international news. I think that it's meaningful to acknowledge there are smaller stories. I also want to talk about the human element here because Jason, the witness to the blimp, came out and he said he had willingness to believe, right, before this happened. So there's something there about people laying their pre-existing belief structures over top of unfamiliar things to give it shape and understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth considering with these things because I, for one, am primed for like UFOs. Yay. Like, let's talk about them. Let's get weird. And I think his story is very relatable, right? You see something, you're excited about it. It seems to confirm ways that you felt, but as it turns out, not so much.
And even with some of my own experiences, I have had to resist the urge to scream, "This is proof," even though it's a completely subjective experience. And to step back and say, but there are things about this in any circumstance that I just don't know.
So the human element makes this worth talking about, right? The specific story. And it's also worth noting because I talk about the history of the area a little bit without giving any detail there earlier. I'll get into that. So it's worth noting that the Charlotte area had its own dedicated, self-proclaimed dedicated, the man put in work, but I don't think it was his full-time job, UFO researcher for decades. UFOs don't really pay the bills unless you're of a certain media caliber. But George Fawcett spent 65 years investigating over 1,200 sightings, 600 of which were in the Carolinas.
If I remember correctly, he's the person who wrote the article that I had read some stats from at the start of our episode about UFOs over Robson County, because he had cataloged how many incidents there had been.
Yeah, he wrote for magazines and newspapers on the topic. He taught a class at a local community college. Like, the guy was dedicated to research.
Yeah.
And he also established the North Carolina chapter of the Mutual UFO Network.
Oh, good for him.
You know, we've talked about them before. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to tracking and researching reports of UFOs. And according to his obituary in the Charlotte Observer, when he learned that an acquaintance had seen strange lights hovering over Lake James near Hickory, he noted that a large body of deep water would be a good place for a UFO to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Which aligns with the long-running theories about USOs. We're talking about Lake Norman. People see things in the area. There's a decades-long UFO researcher. There's more here than just the Goodyear blimp.
Totally. Yeah.
So again, why lead with the Goodyear blimp? Because there's another story that predates it from 2018.
Okay.
At 12:25 a.m., January 1st, 2018, so New Year's Eve, Mooresville resident let his dogs out to relieve themselves and spotted 3 very bright lights in a V shape moving over Lake Norman.
Oh, man. Classic UFO shape.
According to the Observer, the lights were, and I quote, too large and too bright to possibly be any commercial aircraft. And they were very specifically in a triangle, moving faster than anything I've ever seen possible by airplanes. It was also massive and could not have been a drone.
Interesting.
Then in August of 2019, a year later, the Charlotte Observer reported that during the previous month, July of 2019, multiple witnesses had seen bright objects hovering over Lake Norman.
Okay.
I don't have anything more to put a bow on this other than with all the lore surrounding submersibles, nuclear power being an attractant for UFO activity, lake and river monsters and ghosts. I think we should lean into UFOs over Lake Norman.
I just was thinking, like you had mentioned nuclear power. I just checked. Yes, there is McGuire Nuclear Station.
Mm-hmm.
It is right there by Lake Norman. There have been, for decades, there have been reports of UFOs appearing and seeming to basically check out places where either there are nuclear missile silos, especially secret nuclear missile silos, which is an especially fun thing to experience at the height of the Cold War, I'm sure, but also nuclear power plants. I've read a lot of theories about why some think that it's the Space Brothers being worried that we're going to mess up the environment or that we're going to blow ourselves up.
Right.
Not unreasonable concerns. Some theories are that they're drawing power from these somehow, that they're basically recharging their batteries, and basically every possible theory that somebody can invent between them. And the thing is, all of those are invented theories. There's not a lot that we have in terms of evidence to use for the basis of a deduction of what's happening. We can just invent theories and say, if I did that, why would I be doing it? Is ultimately what those people are saying. And I think that's an important consideration. But regardless of that, regardless of the why behind the phenomenon, for decades, there have been countless reports of people saying that they see UFOs show up in places where there is nuclear material.
And we know that it's an irradiated environment based on the Duke Energy report. We have, again, theories about UFOs using water to hide or to recharge or also. And it's just like, there's too many fun dots to connect to completely dismiss UFOs over Lake Norman. So I know this was a short one, but what I really wanted to do was drive home that I don't think we should write off UFOs over Lake Norman just because of the Goodyear blimp incident, which is what the internet has done.
And I think that, to reiterate a point that you made earlier, regardless of whether somebody believes or disbelieves that there are or are not real, quote unquote, UFOs, and whether they are appearing over Lake Norman, there is a fascinating Rorschach test aspect to it that I think anybody who forms an opinion on it, no matter what that opinion is, should stop and question themselves about why they have arrived at that opinion. Because ultimately, we don't know whether these things happen. We don't know if they do happen, why they happen. If they don't happen, we don't know why somebody sees them or says that they see them. So any sort of value judgment or truth value that we assign to this is something that is coming from within. And I think that we need to be very careful to study those things when they arrive out in the world, and we act as though they are obvious to everybody else as well, or should be, because we're talking about ourselves more than we're talking about the UFO when we say it does or does not happen.
Yeah, I think that is a very articulate way of putting it. And this has been fun to knock the rust off with jumping in on a UFO episode. I think that's a good way to get into our spooky season recording. Stay tuned. There will be ghosts and monsters and cryptids and more ghosts and some more UFOs and maybe a ghost like 5 times.
There are going to be some lions. There's even going to be another gray person, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be great. We have the whole lineup planned. Please come out and hang out at Arcana in Durham. Grab a ticket. It's free. We just do need to do it as a ticketed event.
There will be a link in the show notes for this episode. So whatever site you're on or app you're using to listen to this episode, check to make sure you can see the show notes there, because you'll be able to click that link.
We'll also put it up on social media, on our Facebook and our Instagram. This is when I ask for something in return from you, dear listener. That sounds very sinister. Leave us a review. Go review Michael's book on Amazon. Go review the first book on Amazon. Go give the show a review on Apple Podcast, wherever you listen. We like that stuff. So we hope you like the show. Give us a review.
And for creative people, they'll already know this. Like people who publish stuff, make stuff, do stuff online, you all already know this. But if you don't, there are these mysterious, shrouded in mystery, cloaked mechanisms that happen under the hood and all of these sites, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever, YouTube, etc. So we don't really ever know what the thresholds are. But the way that a book gets recommended to somebody, the way that on Amazon, the way that a podcast gets recommended to somebody in a podcast app or on a site or on YouTube or on Spotify or whatever, it all has to do with how many likes they have. It all has to do with how many reviews they've gotten. Each site has their own completely secret machine for producing that recommendation. Lots of people claim that they understand how it's done and they can manipulate that. Those people are full of it. Basically, the bottom line is if you like something, the only way to support it is to indicate that you like it by giving it some stars, liking it on Amazon, whatever.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and we will see you very soon because it's spooky season. There's lots of episodes coming.
Finally. I love this. This is the best.
Michael, get the barrel of episodes.
That beeping sound is the truck pulling in.
Yes.
Talk to you all later. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind-the-scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.
This is great radio where I sit here and think and do a terrible job of it.
I'll stop.
There we go.
Purposely wrote this as ridiculous.
Which I much appreciate. So please proceed.
But we do have to have an arable version.
Yeah. Okay.